For decades, Jamaica's financial sector presented itself as stable, modern, and tightly regulated. In that world, one firm, Stocks and Securities Limited, or SSL, built a reputation that seemed almost untouchable. Established in the early 1970s, SSL branded itself as a homegrown success story, a brokerage for the people, a bridge between ordinary Jamaicans and the promise of investment wealth. Its offices in New Kingston looked every bit the part: sleek signage, polished wood interiors, and customer service designed to project confidence. SSL handled everything from government securities to private wealth management and retirement planning. Over the years, it attracted clients from every social layer: professionals saving for the future, businesses parking excess capital, and a few of the island's most recognizable names. To many, SSL embodied the progress of Jamaica's liberalized financial market. The firm was licensed and supervised by the Financial Services Commission, FSC, the regulator responsible for ensuring that investment houses followed the law, maintained proper reserves, and protected client assets. By the early 2000s, SSL appeared to be a fixture of respectability, even a symbol of upward mobility. Marketing campaigns promised secure growth for every generation. Its leadership spoke often of financial literacy and national development. But beneath that polished surface, warning signs were quietly accumulating. Internal audits, some of which later surfaced in official investigations, flagged issues of poor record keeping and weak controls. Regulators noted late filings, unverified account reconciliations, and inconsistent reporting practices. Yet the firm continued to operate, seemingly untroubled. In public, SSL's image remained spotless. Clients saw a trusted name. Regulators, despite reservations, saw a business still meeting the minimum compliance thresholds. And the government, eager to promote confidence in domestic investment, offered reassurance that the system was sound. But behind that confidence lay a dangerous truth. Jamaica's oversight framework depended heavily on self reporting and post event audits. Without real time monitoring, a brokerage could mask serious internal problems for years. SSL would soon demonstrate how that gap in vigilance could devastate lives. The first cracks appeared quietly. Around late 2022, several longtime clients began noticing irregularities in their portfolio statements: balances that didn't match prior reports, interest payments that had stopped appearing. At first, these issues were dismissed as clerical errors. But when requests for clarification met silence, suspicion grew. By early January 2023, the truth began to surface. SSL informed the Financial Services Commission that suspicious transactions had been detected involving a former employee. Within days, the FSC moved to place the company under enhanced oversight and restrict its operations. What investigators would uncover was far larger than anyone anticipated. According to official updates and court filings, client accounts had been systematically manipulated for more than a decade. The method was painstakingly simple. Insiders with administrative access reportedly altered balance sheets and transaction records to conceal withdrawals and transfers. Funds intended for investment were quietly siphoned into personal accounts or used to mask previous shortfalls. Because SSL's internal controls were outdated and poorly enforced, these irregularities went unnoticed. Reconciliations, the process that matches recorded transactions with actual bank statements, were either skipped or falsified. Annual audits relied on data provided by the same internal systems that had been compromised. The fraud persisted, partly because it targeted trust itself. Many clients rarely reviewed detailed statements. They trusted SSL's name and reputation. When questions arose, employees provided confident explanations, supported by forged documentation. By the time the FSC and law enforcement agencies intervened, More than 200 client accounts had been affected. The total missing funds were estimated in the tens of millions of US dollars. Among those accounts was one belonging to Jamaica's most celebrated athlete, Usain Bolt. The revelation that the world's fastest man, an international icon and national hero, had lost nearly 12.7 million US dollars through the same brokerage stunned the country. Bolt's representatives confirmed that his account, opened in 2012 as part of a long term investment strategy, had been nearly wiped out. Only about 12,000 US dollars remained. The money had been earmarked for his retirement and charitable foundation, funds meant to outlast his sprinting career.
For me, it's tough, but I think through the years of competing, that helped me to understand and just focus on what's the matter. I leave the matter in my lawyer's hand, you understand? I'm just trying to focus on my family and try not to think too much about it because it's a stressful situation.
The inclusion of Bolt's name transformed what might have been seen as another corporate scandal into a national reckoning. If someone of his stature, with access to lawyers, accountants, and global advisors, could be defrauded, what hope did ordinary Jamaicans have? Investigators from the Financial Investigations Division, FID, and the Major Organized Crime and Anti Corruption Agency, MOCA, were called in. They traced multiple transactions showing how internal staff manipulated client records. A former employee eventually gave a sworn statement admitting to unauthorized transactions and falsification of data, though the full scope of her actions, and whether others were involved, remains under legal review. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Finance and the FSC began issuing coordinated statements to calm the public. SSL was placed under temporary management and barred from taking new clients. But investors wanted answers. How could such large sums vanish without detection for so long? The unfolding investigation revealed systemic weaknesses, not just at SSL, but across the regulatory structure. The FSC acknowledged that it had flagged SSL as a problem institution years earlier and had imposed conditions for compliance. Yet the firm continued operating. Internal reports described poor governance culture and persistent non-compliance. The warnings had not translated into decisive enforcement. As details emerged, it became clear that the SSL case was not merely about theft. It was about failure of corporate ethics, of oversight, and of accountability. The financial losses were staggering, but the human toll was worse. Behind every account number lay someone's savings, education fund, or pension. When SSL's operations collapsed, hundreds of clients discovered that their financial security had been erased overnight. One elderly investor told the Sunday Gleaner she had placed 60 million Jamaican dollars, her life savings, with SSL in 2019. The money was meant to sustain her through retirement. Instead, she was told the funds had never been properly invested. The stress, she said, left her hospitalized and unable to pay medical bills. It's like the floor went out from under me, she said. They took everything I worked for. Small business owners were also affected. Some used SSL to hold working capital, expecting modest interest while retaining access to cash. When their accounts were frozen, payrolls stalled and operations shut down. Others faced legal consequences of their own, unable to meet obligations to suppliers and staff. For Jamaica's middle class, professionals, teachers, and small entrepreneurs, the SSL scandal struck a deep nerve. Many saw it as proof that financial institutions serve the elite while leaving ordinary citizens exposed. But perhaps the most symbolic blow came from Usain Bolt's situation. Bolt rarely comments on financial matters, but when he did speak publicly about SSL, his words carried the weight of national disappointment. I've been working hard year after year, saving for the future, he said in a media interview in early 2024. And now, after all this time, we still don't know where it reached. It almost at a stalemate. The government can do something big about this, but nothing really happened. His frustration echoed what thousands of investors felt: silence from those in power. Months passed with few updates from authorities. The promised forensic audit, conducted by UK based firm Kroll, remained unpublished. Opposition MPs called for transparency, arguing that the public had a right to know how a regulated institution could fail so completely. For many Jamaicans, the government's muted response felt like betrayal. This was not a faceless financial crime. It was a collapse of trust between citizens and the institutions meant to protect them. As the months turned to years, the recovery process dragged on. Legal restrictions under the Proceeds of Crime Act meant that assets could only be seized after convictions, a slow, technical process. Victims were told to wait while audits, court filings, and procedural reviews inched forward. Finance Minister Nigel Clark publicly acknowledged the delays, but described them as necessary to ensure accuracy. By April 2024, officials confirmed that about 70% of client assets had been secured or transferred back, but cash reimbursements remained limited. Many investors, especially retirees, said that such assurances were meaningless when their daily lives were already collapsing. Bolt's case continued to dominate headlines, symbolizing the broader crisis of confidence. International outlets like the BBC and Reuters framed it as a test of Jamaica's ability to police its financial system. At home, commentators argued that the silence of leaders risked damaging not just one institution, but the country's reputation as a place to invest and do business. The SSL scandal had evolved from a case of financial misconduct into a mirror reflecting the nation's vulnerabilities. It showed how easily decades of trust could be erased, not only through fraud, but through complacency, delay, and silence. By mid 2024, public hearings, lawsuits, and criminal probes were still ongoing. Victims waited for closure. Bolt waited for answers. Each day that passed without resolution deepened the sense that justice was moving too slowly and that accountability remained out of reach. And yet, for all the anger and disappointment, one fact was undeniable. SSL had not simply failed its clients, it had revealed the fragility of the very system designed to protect them. Years before the fraud broke, Jamaica's Financial Services Commission, FSC, had already marked SSL as a problem institution. Internal reviews from as early as 2010 detailed governance failures, breaches of client account rules, and chronic noncompliance. The FSC imposed enhanced monitoring in 2017 and again in 2022, but enforcement stopped short of decisive action. There were no public disclosures, no license suspension, no official warning to clients. And so SSL carried on, gathering deposits, advising investors, and cultivating an image of credibility. When its downfall came, it did not arrive suddenly. It was the slow result of years of regulatory hesitation and political quiet. Soon the first name appeared in the headlines: Jean-Ann Panton, a longtime client relationship manager at SSL. She was arrested and charged with a catalog of offenses: larceny as a servant, forgery, falsification of accounts, breaches of the Cybercrimes Act, and transactions involving criminal property. Prosecutors allege she siphoned funds from client accounts for more than a decade, creating fake statements to conceal the losses. But few Jamaicans believe Panton acted alone. The scheme, according to forensic analysts, required access to multiple layers of SSL's operations: portfolio records, payment systems, compliance reports. It is difficult to imagine one mid level employee manipulating millions across dozens of accounts without detection or assistance. Public sentiment reflects that doubt. Commentators, former employees, and investors have all questioned how such systemic fraud could persist in a regulated firm without senior complicity. Yet, despite the scale of the case, Panton remains the only person criminally charged. That fact has become a symbol of something larger: the depth of corruption and the culture of protection that surrounds Jamaica's financial elite. Civil suits tell a wider story. In 2024, businessman George Lloyd Chai filed a claim naming Panton, former SSL chairman Hugh Croskery, and executive Mark Croskery, accusing them of fraud, breach of trust, and unjust enrichment, totaling nearly 3.8 billion Jamaican dollars. All have denied wrongdoing. The case remains before the Supreme Court. In government hired British forensic specialists, Kroll Associates UK Limited to audit SSL's records, covering transactions from 2010 to 2023. Their work, reportedly exhaustive, was completed months later. Yet as of 2025, its findings remain secret. Officials say the report is confidential, tied to ongoing criminal proceedings. But for victims, hundreds of them, secrecy feels like betrayal all over again. The lack of transparency has fueled speculation of a wider cover up, that releasing the audit could expose negligence, political connections, or structural failures far beyond one company. Opposition leaders have demanded the report's release, calling the silence institutional self protection. Journalists note that even parliamentary committees tasked with oversight have not seen the full document. The consequence is predictable. Public trust has eroded further. While the state debates procedure, lives unravel. A retired teacher lost 18 million Jamaican dollars, her entire pension. A small business owner who invested working capital for safekeeping lost everything and had to close her shop. A 78-year-old widow who placed her savings with SSL told reporters she suffered a breakdown after learning her funds were never actually invested. These are not isolated tales. They represent hundreds of Jamaicans who believed they were securing their future. Many have died waiting for restitution. Others are too exhausted to fight. When Usain Bolt finally broke his silence, his words captured the national mood. It's hard to sit and watch. After 2 years, nothing moved. We can't come and say we reach anywhere. It's almost like a stalemate. I believe the government can do something big about this, but so far nothing happened. For a man who once embodied Jamaica's pride on the global stage, the comment cut deep. Bolt wasn't merely demanding his money back. He was asking why the institutions of his own country seemed powerless or unwilling to deliver justice. His frustration gave voice to thousands who felt invisible. According to the Ministry of Finance's April 2024 update, over 200 accounts were affected. Losses exceeded 3 billion Jamaican dollars. Only a small portion of assets have been traced, and even fewer recovered. Under Jamaica's Proceeds of Crime Act, authorities cannot redistribute or compensate victims until criminal convictions are secured, a process that could take years. In early 2025, a court appointed trustee announced a victims' compensation fund. Claimants were told to submit proof of loss by April 30th. For many, it was too late. Several elderly investors had already passed away. Others no longer had documents to prove ownership after SSL's offices were seized. Meanwhile, the government urges patience. Minister Clark argues that due process must prevail. But to citizens who have lost everything, due process has become a synonym for delay. In Parliament, blame continues to shift. The government insists it has taken unprecedented action, winding up SSL, tightening oversight rules, and beginning legislative reforms. Opposition leader Mark Golding counters that these steps came only after disaster struck. The FSC knew of SSL's problems for years, he said. Their inaction amounts to complicity. Editorials across the region echo that sentiment. The scandal is now seen not only as a case of fraud, but as a case study in regulatory paralysis. For the FSC, credibility has been shredded. For the Ministry of Finance, transparency has become a question mark. And for ordinary Jamaicans, the idea of safe investing feels like a fantasy. The persistence of the lone wolf narrative, that one employee fooled an entire institution for a decade, strains belief. Investigators themselves have hinted that more individuals may be involved, yet no additional charges have materialized. The result is a perception that someone, somewhere, is being protected. In coffee shops, on talk shows, and across social media, Jamaicans ask the same question: how could Jean-Ann Panton move millions without help? The answer, or the lack of one, has become emblematic of a deeper corruption, not just the theft of money, but the theft of accountability. Economists warn that the SSL collapse has shaken confidence across Jamaica's entire financial sector. Retail investors are withdrawing funds, turning to cash and foreign currencies. New account openings have slowed dramatically. For a country striving to modernize its economy and build public markets, this erosion of trust is devastating. The FSC has introduced new compliance rules and technology systems to monitor client accounts in real time. The Ministry of Finance has promised stronger fiduciary penalties and more independent oversight boards. But without transparency, reform feels like rhetoric. And with the Kroll audit still hidden, doubts persist about whether the full truth will ever be known. As 2025 closes, SSL is being dismantled under court supervision. The liquidators continue to trace assets. The FID and MOCA continue to pursue leads. Jean-Ann Panton awaits trial. The civil suits crawl through the legal system. No additional executives have been charged. No public explanation has been offered for how the fraud escaped detection for so long. The victims remain largely uncompensated. The government maintains that justice is coming. The people, increasingly, are not convinced. The SSL story is no longer about one brokerage. It is about the fragile line between governance and complicity. It is about the culture of silence that protects the powerful and scapegoats the convenient. It is about a regulator that saw danger coming and looked away. And it is about a government that promises accountability while guarding secrecy. When oversight fails, corruption doesn't need to hide. It thrives in plain sight. Usain Bolt's presence in this saga elevates it beyond economics. He is more than a victim. He is a symbol of Jamaica's potential, disciplined, proud, and relentless. To see him standing among the defrauded sends a chilling message. Even the nation's hero is not immune. His public disappointment has become a moral verdict on the system itself. Bolt once ran for the glory of his flag. Now he waits, like everyone else, for the integrity of that flag to mean something again. As of now, there are investigations, reports, and statements, but still no closure. The public has heard of millions stolen, yet no network exposed. The only person behind bars is the one most people believe could never have done it alone. That contradiction defines the scandal. The fastest man in the world is still waiting for answers. The slowest justice in the region is still finding its pace. The SSL debacle is more than a financial catastrophe, it is a moral one. It shows what happens when institutions designed to protect the public instead protect themselves. Money can be replaced, laws can be rewritten, but trust, once broken, rarely returns. The story of SSL remains unfinished, but its lesson is already clear. Transparency delayed is justice denied. This is Caribbean Files. We'll keep asking the questions others avoid about who knew, who looked away, and who still benefits from the silence. If you believe Jamaicans deserve answers, subscribe, share this investigation, and join the discussion below. Do you believe Jean-Ann Panton acted alone, or is she the face of something much deeper? Because until that question is answered, the SSL case and the faith of an entire nation will remain unresolved.